He opened the hidden camera feed expecting to catch her wasting his time. 3 caregivers before her had already proven what money couldn't buy: loyalty. One stole from him. One neglected his daughters while scrolling through her phone. Another sold photos of his paralyzed twins to gossip sites for a quick payout. So when Caleb Worthington saw 2 empty wheelchairs in the middle of his living room at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday, his breath stopped. Then he saw them, Noelle and Ivy, his daughters, his paralyzed, impossible, never going to walk daughters standing on their own feet, trembling but upright, taking small, shaking steps toward the maid's open arms. Caleb's phone slipped from his hand. His knees buckled. His back pressed against the cold marble wall of his study, and the billionaire who had replaced faith with surveillance, who had buried God alongside his wife, watched the impossible happen on a screen in his own mansion. 2 years earlier, Caleb Grant Worthington lost the only thing his empire couldn't protect. His wife, Alara, died 3 hours after giving birth to their twin daughters. No rare disease, no tragic accident, just complications the best hospital in Manhattan couldn't stop. She squeezed his hand, whispered their daughters' names one last time, Noelle, Ivy, and then she was gone. The monitors went flat. The room went silent, and Caleb walked out to meet 2 premature babies he'd have to raise alone. The doctors didn't wait long to deliver the second blow. Spinal cord injury during delivery. Both girls. Severe damage to the lumbar region. Mr. Worthington, we need to be very clear with you. Based on the MRI results and neurological assessments, independent mobility is not realistic. They may never walk. Possibly never. Caleb heard the words. He nodded. He signed forms. But inside, something vital shut down. He'd already prayed in that delivery room. He'd already begged God to save Ilara. And God had been silent. So when they told him his daughters would spend their lives in wheelchairs, Caleb didn't pray. He planned. Months blurred together. Noelle and Ivy grew, but they didn't walk. They didn't pull themselves up. They sat strapped in custom pediatric wheelchairs, beautiful and still, their eyes watching a world they couldn't fully join. Caleb hired the top neurologists in the country. He flew in specialists from Switzerland and Japan. He purchased experimental therapy equipment that cost more than most people's homes. He turned an entire wing of his Connecticut estate into a medical facility. Nothing worked. The girls didn't improve. The specialists all said the same thing. The damage is permanent. And Caleb, alone in his mansion, full of staff but empty of life, started to believe them. He buried hope in the same grave where he'd buried his wife. Then came the caregivers. 3 and 14 months. The first, a middle-aged woman with 2 decades of pediatric experience, quit after 3 weeks. Said watching disabled children was too emotionally draining. The second spent more time taking selfies in his home than caring for his daughters. Caleb fired her after finding her phone filled with photos she'd posted online, tagging his location, violating every privacy agreement she'd signed. The third seemed perfect, compassionate, attentive, professional, until TMZ published photos of his daughters and their therapy equipment with the headline, "Billionaire's Tragic Twins." She'd sold the photos for $8,000. Caleb's lawyers buried her in litigation, but the damage was done. His daughter's suffering had become entertainment. After that, something inside Caleb Worthington turned to stone. He stopped seeing caregivers as help. He saw them as threats. He installed cameras in every room of the estate: living room, nursery, therapy room, hallways, everywhere. He watched the footage late at night, frame by frame, looking for the lie, the angle, the betrayal he knew was coming. Control became his religion. Surveillance became his prayer. So when Maribel Cross walked through his front door on a cold October morning, 31 years old, soft-spoken, unimpressed by wealth, Caleb didn't see a person. He saw the fourth inevitable disappointment. Follow the medical protocol exactly, he told her, not looking up from the background check report. No improvising, no bonding routines, no hope speeches. The doctors have made their prognosis clear. My daughters will not walk. Your job is to keep them comfortable and safe. Nothing more. Maribel nodded slowly. I understand what the doctor said, Mr. Worthington. But she didn't just understand. She disagreed. Not with her words, with her actions. Because Maribel didn't follow the protocol. She sang hymns while stretching the girls' legs in ways the physical therapist never tried. She prayed over them when she thought no one was listening. She spoke to Noelle and Ivy like they were whole, not broken, like their bodies were delayed, not defeated. She moved their wheelchairs closer together so they could hold hands. She played music and swayed their little arms to the rhythm. And Caleb watched it all. Every moment, every prayer, every song. At first, he watched to catch her stepping out of line, to document her failures before firing her like the others. Then he watched because he couldn't look away. Because something was happening in that house that his cameras couldn't measure but couldn't deny. Noelle started smiling during Maribel's songs. Ivy's fingers, which hadn't moved in months, began to curl and release. Their eyes tracked movement better. They laughed. They responded. And one evening, while Maribel was gently holding Noelle's legs in a standing position, the little girl's knees locked, just for 3 seconds. But they locked. Caleb told himself it was a muscle spasm. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself hope was a trap that would break him the way Alara's death had. But late at night, alone in his office with 6 monitors glowing in the dark, Caleb Worthington watched a woman believe for his daughters in ways he no longer could. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he'd sealed off the day Alara died, something started to crack. He didn't trust it. He couldn't. Because hope, when you've buried it under 2 years of grief, doesn't feel like light. It feels like a wound reopening. But before we go any further, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss how this story ends. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been too afraid to hope again? Have you ever watched a miracle happen to someone who'd given up on them? This story is for everyone who thinks impossible is final. Because sometimes God doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes he just moves. Now let's rewind one more time. Let's go back to the moment everything truly changed. Not when the girls walked, but when their father finally stopped hiding behind cameras and started believing in something bigger than his pain. It started small. So small Caleb almost missed it. Week 1, Maribel did something the other caregivers never did. She moved the wheelchairs, not to different rooms, just closer together, 6 inches apart instead of 3 feet. Close enough that Noelle and Ivy could see each other's faces, close enough that their small hands could reach out if they tried. Why did you do that? Caleb asked her on the camera intercom one morning, his voice sharp through the speaker. Maribel looked up at the camera mounted in the corner, unfazed. They're sisters, Mr. Worthington. They should be able to hold hands. That wasn't in the care plan. No, sir, it wasn't. She didn't move them back. Caleb watched her that afternoon during their physical therapy session. The protocol was clear. 15 minutes of assisted leg stretches, range of motion exercises, then rest. Maribel followed it. Mostly. But while she stretched Noelle's left leg, she sang. Softly. A hymn Caleb didn't recognize, but somehow remembered. Something about valleys and shadows, and fear not. Noelle's eyes tracked Maribel's face, not just looking, watching, focused in a way she hadn't been in months. Then her fingers moved, just the index and middle finger of her right hand, a tiny flutter, barely visible. Caleb rewound the footage 3 times. It wasn't a spasm. It was a response. Time to the music. He told himself it was nothing. Coincidence, reflex, anything but what it looked like. By week 2, Ivy started lifting her head during feedings. Not much, maybe half an inch. But she held it there for 5 seconds, then 8, then 12. The pediatric neurologist had said her neck muscles were too weak. That gravity would win, but gravity was losing. Maribel didn't celebrate, didn't call attention to it. She just whispered, "There you go, sweet girl. I see you. You're so strong." Caleb watched from his office, jaw tight, chest knotted. He opened a document on his computer. Reasons to terminate caregiver number 4. He typed 3 bullet points, then deleted them. Typed them again, deleted them again, closed the laptop. That night, he watched the footage from earlier that day. Maribel had stayed late, past her shift. She sat on the floor between the 2 wheelchairs, her back against the couch, hands resting gently on each girl's foot. And she prayed, out loud, eyes closed. "Lord, I don't know your plan, but I know you see these babies. I know you knit them together in their mother's womb. I know you called them by name before they took their first breath. So I'm asking you, not because I'm special, but because you're faithful. Let them feel your presence. Let their bodies remember what you designed them to do. Let their father see you haven't forgotten him." Caleb's hand hovered over the keyboard. He should stop the playback. He should write her up for overstepping, but he didn't move. He just watched her pray for his daughters, for him. And something in his chest ached in a way it hadn't since the funeral. Week 3 brought something undeniable. During breakfast, Maribel was feeding Ivy mashed bananas when the little girl locked eyes with her. Not a glance, a stare. 10 seconds, 15, 20. Ivy smiled, a real full gummy smile that crinkled her eyes. Then she laughed, a sound Caleb hadn't heard in 6 months. He was standing in the hallway outside the kitchen when it happened. He'd been on his way to his office, but had stopped when he heard Maribel talking to the girls. He froze. His throat tightened. He turned and walked away before they saw him. That afternoon, he called Maribel into his study. She stood in the doorway, calm, hands folded in front of her. "You're not following the care protocols," he said, not looking at her. "No, sir, not entirely. You're praying over my daughters." "Yes, sir. You're treating them like they can be healed. I'm treating them like they already are healed. Their bodies just haven't caught up yet." Caleb's jaw clenched. He stood, paced to the window, stared out at the empty gardens. "You're filling them with false hope." "No, sir. I'm filling them with faith." "What's the difference?" Maribel stepped further into the room, her voice steady but gentle. "Faith isn't pretending pain doesn't exist, Mr. Worthington. It's believing pain isn't final." Caleb turned to face her, eyes hard. "My wife believed that. She prayed through 3 miscarriages. She prayed through every IVF cycle. She prayed in that delivery room, and she died anyway." Maribel didn't flinch. "I'm sorry for your loss. Truly. But your wife's death doesn't mean God stopped listening. It means we don't see the whole picture." "Don't," Caleb said, his voice low, dangerous. "Don't give me the mystery of God's speech. I've heard it. I've lived it. And it's just another way of saying he doesn't care." "Or," Maribel said quietly, "it's another way of saying he's still working, even when we can't see it." Caleb said nothing. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "If you'd like me to leave, I will," Maribel said. "But those girls are responding, sir. You've seen it. And I think you're afraid of what that means." She left before he could respond. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat in his office, monitors glowing in the dark, scrolling through footage from the past 3 weeks. Noelle's finger movements, Ivy's head lifts, the eye contact. the laughter. He paused on a frame of Maribel kneeling between the girls, her hands on their legs, her lips moving in prayer. He opened his laptop, typed into the search bar, neuroplasticity in children with spinal injuries. Then, faith-based healing studies. Then, can belief affect physical recovery? He read for 2 hours, studies, testimonies, medical journals, anecdotal reports that sounded like fairy tales but were documented by doctors. His rational mind fought every word, but his heart, that traitorous, desperate part of him he'd tried to bury, whispered, "What if?" The next morning, the physical therapist arrived for the twins' weekly session. Caleb watched on the monitor as the therapist ran through her assessments. Then she stopped, frowned, checked her notes, ran the tests again. She found Caleb in his study 20 minutes later. "Mr. Worthington, I need to show you something." She pulled out her tablet, showed him the progress charts. Muscle tone has improved. Range of motion in both girls has increased by 18% in 3 weeks. That's not typical. Actually, it's exceptional. What does that mean? It means whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because something is working. After she left, Caleb stood alone in the hallway, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed, a camera alert. Movement in the living room. He opened the app, saw Maribel kneeling on the floor, holding Noelle in a supported standing position. The little girl's legs were shaking, but they were holding weight. For 3 full seconds they held. Caleb's hand trembled. He closed the app, leaned against the wall, and for the first time in 2 years, he let himself feel something more dangerous than grief. He let himself feel hope. It was 11:47 p.m. when Caleb saw her. He hadn't meant to check the cameras that late. He'd been trying to sleep, failing, and had reached for his phone out of habit. The living room feed was still active, and there was Maribel sitting on the floor between the 2 cribs long after her shift had ended. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reading. She was just there, her hand resting gently on Noelle's back, her other hand holding Ivy's tiny fingers, and she was praying. Not the quiet, composed prayers from before. She was crying. Her shoulders shook. Her voice broke. "Please, God, please let them walk. Let them run. Let them dance at their wedding someday. I know you can. I've seen you do impossible things, so please, not for me, for them, for their father, who's forgotten how to believe. Show him." "You haven't forgotten him." Caleb's throat closed. His hand tightened around the phone. He watched her wipe her face, lean down, and kiss both girls on the forehead before finally standing and leaving the room. He sat in the dark for 20 minutes after the feed went still. She loves them more bravely than I do. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome, undeniable. He'd been protecting his daughters from a distance through screens and protocols and sterile medical plans. But Maribel was loving them up close, with her hands, her voice, her tears. She was doing what he'd been too afraid to do since Alara died. She was hoping. The next morning, Caleb didn't go to his study. He walked past it, down the hallway, past the master bedroom, past the guest suites, all the way to the end of the east wing where a door had stayed closed for 2 years. The nursery. His hand hovered over the handle. He hadn't been inside since the week Alara died. The interior designer had finished it 3 days before the delivery. Alara had stood in the center of the room, hands on her swollen belly, crying happy tears. "It's perfect, Caleb. It's perfect." He pushed the door open. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The soft yellow walls, the 2 white cribs with their embroidered name plaques, Noelle Grace, Ivy Rose, the rocking chair by the window where Alara had planned to sing lullabies, the bookshelf she'd filled with stories she'd never get to read. Caleb stepped inside. His legs felt weak. He walked to the rocking chair, ran his hand over the armrest. Alara had picked this one, said it was the most comfortable, said she'd spend hours here with their daughters. His chest cracked, open. He sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. And for the first time since the funeral, Caleb Worthington let himself break. Not the controlled, silent grief he'd carried for 2 years. The raw, guttural kind. The kind that came from a place deeper than logic, deeper than control. He cried for Alara, for the life they'd planned, for the mother his daughters would never know. He cried for the father he'd become, distant, cold, hiding behind technology because flesh and hope were too dangerous. And then, in a voice that felt foreign and familiar all at once, he whispered, "God, if you're still listening, I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. He waited. For thunder. For a voice. For some sign that his apology had been heard. But there was only silence. The soft kind. The kind that didn't feel empty. Just quiet. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I don't know how to believe again. I'm afraid. I'm so afraid that if I let myself love them the way I should, I'll lose them too. Just like I lost her." His voice broke. But even as the words left his mouth, something shifted. Not outside him. Inside him. A loosening. A exhale he'd been holding for 24 months. He sat there for another 10 minutes. Then he stood, wiped his face, and walked out. But he didn't close the door behind him. Over the next week, something changed in Caleb Worthington. Small things, quiet things. He stopped checking the cameras every hour. Stopped rewinding footage to analyze every moment. He started leaving his study door open. Started walking past the living room and pausing instead of hiding. One afternoon, he stood just outside the therapy room door. Maribel was singing again, something about mountains moving and chains breaking, and he heard it. Laughter, Noelle's high-pitched giggle, Ivy's softer, breathier laugh. The sound pierced him, not with pain, with something else, something that felt dangerously close to joy. He didn't walk away this time. The next day, he sat in the hallway while Maribel worked with the girls. He didn't watch through a screen. He just listened. And when Maribel came out and saw him there, she didn't say anything. She just smiled, a small, knowing smile, then kept walking. Shame settled over him like a blanket, not the crushing kind, the kind that comes with awareness, with repentance. He'd spent 2 years punishing himself, punishing his daughters, keeping them at arm's length because closeness required vulnerability, and vulnerability required trust, and trust required faith. And faith was the one thing he'd sworn off. But Maribel had it, in abundance, reckless, fearless, confident faith. And it was changing his daughters, right in front of him. That Thursday, Caleb walked into the living room while Maribel was working with the twins. She had them both in supported standing positions, their small legs trembling under their weight, her hands steady on their torsos. "You're doing so good, sweet girls," Maribel said, her voice soft but certain. "Your legs remember. Your body remembers. God already finished the work. We're just catching up." Noelle's knees locked for 5 seconds, then buckled. Maribel caught her gently, smiling. That's it, baby girl." Caleb stood frozen in the doorway. Maribel glanced up, saw him, but didn't stop. She moved to Ivy, repositioned her, encouraged her the same way. Ivy's legs shook violently but held for 3 seconds, then 4. Caleb's hands curled into fists at his sides, not from anger, from restraint, from the unbearable need to believe what he was seeing. Maribel lowered both girls back into their wheelchairs, kissed their heads, then stood and turned to Caleb. "They're getting stronger," she said simply. "I see that." "Do you?" Her question wasn't accusatory, just direct, honest. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. I'm trying to. That's all God needs, Mr. Worthington. Someone willing to try. She left him alone with his daughters. He knelt down between their wheelchairs, looked at their faces. Noelle reached for his hand. He let her take it. Her grip was weak but present. Real. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I've been so far away. Ivy cooed. Noelle smiled, and Caleb stayed there on the floor with them until the sun set outside the windows. 3 days later, Caleb was in a meeting on the 3rd floor when his phone buzzed. A motion alert, living room camera, 3:42 p.m. He frowned. Maribel's shift didn't end until 5i. She shouldn't be moving the girls yet. He opened the app. The feed loaded, and his breath stopped. 2 wheelchairs, empty, pushed to the side of the room. 2 little girls, standing in the center of the floor, trembling, holding on to nothing, and Maribel, 10 feet away, kneeling with her arms open. Come on, babies, come to me. You can do it. Just one step. Jesus has you. I have you. Come on. Caleb's phone nearly slipped from his hand. Noelle took a step. Shaky, unsteady, but a step. Then Ivy. Then another. And another. Caleb didn't remember dropping his phone. Didn't remember running. Didn't remember taking the stairs 3 at a time or bursting through the hallway. All he knew was that one moment he was staring at a screen, and the next he was standing in the doorway of his living room, watching his daughters walk. Not crawl, not shuffle, walk. Noelle took another trembling step, her arms stretched out for balance, her legs shaking so hard it looked like they might give out any second. But they didn't. She kept moving, one foot, then the other. Her face was scrunched in concentration, her mouth open, her breath coming fast. Ivy followed, slower, more cautious, but moving. Actually moving on legs the best neurologists in the country had declared useless. Maribel knelt on the hardwood floor 10 feet away, arms wide, tears streaming down her face. That's it, babies. That's it. You're doing it. Come on. Come to me. Just a few more steps. Noelle's foot caught. She stumbled. Caleb's heart stopped, but she didn't fall. She steadied herself, took another step, and then she was there. She collapsed into Maribel's arms, and Maribel caught her, pulled her close, laughing and crying at the same time. Oh, sweet girl, sweet, brave girl. You did it. You did it. Ivy reached them a moment later, her legs finally giving out as she tumbled forward. Maribel caught her too, wrapped both girls in her arms, rocking them gently, whispering, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Thank you." Caleb's knees buckled. He hit the floor hard, his back against the doorframe, his hands shaking. His vision blurred. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The only sound in his head was a roar, half disbelief, half something he hadn't felt in so long he'd forgotten its name. Wonder. Maribel looked up, saw him. Her smile faded into something softer. She didn't say anything, just held his daughters and waited. Caleb tried to stand. His legs wouldn't work. He crawled, actually crawled across his own living room floor toward his children, toward the impossible. When he reached them, he stopped. His hands hovered in the air. He was afraid to touch them, afraid that if he did, they'd disappear, that he'd wake up, that this would turn out to be another dream he'd been having since Alara died. Noelle reached for him first. Her small hand grabbed his shirt, pulled. "Daddy." The word broke him. Caleb pulled both girls into his arms, held them so tightly he was afraid he'd hurt them, but he couldn't let go. He couldn't. His shoulders shook, his breath came in gasps, and he sobbed. Not the silent, controlled kind. The ugly, full-body kind. The kind that came from 2 years of grief and fear and loneliness finally cracking open. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I should have been Here, I should have believed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Noelle patted his face with her tiny hand. Ivy laid her head on his shoulder, and Caleb, for the first time since Alara died, prayed out loud. His voice was broken, barely a whisper, but the words came. God, I don't know what to say. I don't know how this happened. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve them. But thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry I stopped believing. I'm sorry I blamed you. I'm sorry I've been so angry. Please forgive me. Help me be the father they need. Help me believe again. He stayed there on the floor, holding his daughters, crying into their hair until his voice gave out, and the only sound left was their breathing. When he finally looked up, Maribel was standing a few feet away, giving them space, her hands folded, tears still wet on her cheeks. Caleb's voice was hoarse. You did this. Maribel shook her head gently. No, sir. You did, Caleb insisted. You believed when no one else did. You loved them when I couldn't. You gave them hope. Maribel stepped closer, knelt down beside him, her voice soft but certain. God heals, Mr. Worthington. I just stayed long enough to believe him. Caleb stared at her, then at his daughters, then back at her. How? His voice cracked. How did you know? I didn't, Maribel said, but I know who does. And I decided that was enough. Caleb nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He looked down at Noelle and Ivy, who were both smiling now, babbling to each other, touching his face, pulling his hair, completely unaware that they'd just shattered 2 years of impossibility. He kissed their foreheads, both of them, over and over. 3 months later, the cameras came down. All of them. Living room, hallways, nursery, therapy room. Caleb hired a tech company to remove every wire, every lens, every reminder that he'd once tried to control love through surveillance. The therapy room became a playroom. The medical equipment was donated. The space filled with toys, books, a small piano Noelle liked to bang on, a set of building blocks Ivy stacked and knocked over 100 times a day. The mansion, which had been silent for 2 years, filled with sound again, laughter, music, running footsteps on hardwood floors. The girls weren't perfect walkers yet. They still stumbled, still fell, but they got back up. Every time. Maribel stayed, not as a caregiver, as family. She ate dinner with them, played with the girls, prayed with Caleb when the grief tried to creep back in. And on Sunday mornings, Caleb did something he hadn't done since Alara's funeral. He went to church. He sat in the back row, alone at first, just listening. He didn't raise his hands, didn't sing, just sat there and let the words wash over him. But after a few weeks, he started singing, quietly, off-key, but singing. One Sunday, Noelle and Ivy came with him. They sat on either side of him in the pew, swinging their legs, whispering, too loud, drawing pictures on the bulletin. And when the pastor asked if anyone had a testimony to share, Caleb stood. His voice shook, but he spoke. 2 years ago, I lost my wife. And I thought I lost God too. My daughters were told they'd never walk, and I believed it. Because believing anything else felt too dangerous. But someone else believed for me, and God met her faith. My daughters are walking today, not because of medicine, not because of money, because of grace I didn't deserve and a God who didn't give up on me, even when I gave up on him. The sanctuary was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. Caleb sat down, tears in his eyes, and felt Noelle grab his hand. Miracles don't wait for permission. They don't need your approval or your understanding. They just show up. In the hands of a woman who refused to stop believing. In the legs of 2 little girls who defied every medical report. In the heart of a father who Learn that faith isn't pretending pain doesn't exist. It's believing pain isn't final. Faith moves before proof arrives. It steps out when the ground is still shaking. It holds on when logic says, let go. And sometimes, God doesn't use the smartest person in the room, or the richest, or the most qualified. He uses the one who's willing, the one who shows up, the one who loves bravely when everyone else has walked away. Love is the loudest form of belief, and belief, when it's planted in the right soil, doesn't just grow, it breaks impossible in half. Caleb Worthington learned that the hard way. He learned that cameras can't capture miracles, that control can't create them, that money can't buy them, but faith can receive them. And sometimes, that's all God needs. Someone willing to believe him before they see him move. Someone willing to stay in the room when everyone else has left. Someone willing to kneel on the floor, stretch out their arms,